Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 305 Insights. I'm your host, Alan Somerton, and today we're kind of doing a in-season check-in on the Miami Hurricanes as we haven't been able to record a lot of episodes recently. So we're kind of just going to gauge the temperature of how the season's going compared to expectations. And so far, this season has not been what was expected. Now, the first few weeks of the season, everything was going according to plan. You had the win against Notre Dame when you won 27-24, but you saw some cracks in there where you were up big and you kind of let Notre Dame come back into the game and you had to hit a long field goal. That's where you started seeing signs where tempered expectations of you pretty much dominated that game until certain parts of the second half. And the Bethune game happened. You dominated that one, of course. South Florida, you dominated that at the time. South Florida was ranked 18. You left no doubt with a 49-12 victory. Bethune game was 45-3. And then Florida came. And although the final score was 26-7, again, you saw what I would call like the cracks in the foundation of what you wanted to see this season. It's like they were toying with their food. And at a certain point in the game, I believe it was 13-7 in the third quarter. Like Florida had one good stretch where they had a few drives, and that was about it. And again, the score was 26-7, and it wasn't indicative of how much Miami dominated. But again, when you're late in the second half and you're only up 13-7, despite all the numbers saying you should be up more, cause for concern. And then again, a similar story unfolded when they went to Tallahassee. They were up big. It was 28-3, and they ended up winning 28-22. You let the team back in the game. And again, I was called a homer. I had a biased perspective of looking at the game and saying, again, you could say that UM let their foot off the gas, but FSU did get all those yards. FSU did execute those plays. And if you heard the staff after the game, especially the defensive coordinator, saying that there were opportunities for FSU to hit plays, and they didn't. So deep down, the staff knew that there were miscues and lack of execution on FSU's side that allowed for them to get that victory in Tallahassee. And then you had the primetime Friday night game against Louisville, where Carson Beck had multiple turnovers, and he ended up losing 24-21. The Stanford game was supposed to be the get-right game. Again, the score isn't indicative of how that game went. The final score 42-7, but at halftime it was 7-7. And then you finally leave the state of Florida to go face SMU, and you lose in overtime 26-20. So now you could afford the Louisville loss. If you really wanted to lose a game, okay, lose the Louisville game. Don't lose the rivalry games. Don't lose the big games. But you can't lose multiple games with this roster. You eventually knew it's in UM's DNA at this point to drop a random ACC game against inferior teams. And when I say inferior, I'm talking about on a talent level. The Braun brothers at Louisville are going to scheme up an amazing game on offense and execute the way they need to do. And they took that pass rush out of the game by getting rid of the ball quick. And again, they had a lot of luck with the turnovers. But again, you saw what Florida State was trying to do and basically saying, we're going to stack the box and stop the run and force Carson Beck to be the hero. The issue with that is Florida State has Earl Little playing safety, and he is not a good safety when it comes to coverage. He is going to bite on those play action plays because he is the rover in Tony White's defense. He's supposed to be a downhill safety. FSU did not have the proper coverage to execute their game plan. But when you want to run into teams that do, and you force Carson Beck to make mistakes, it causes Mario Cristobal to become a more conservative coach, which is not the way this team should be calling its offensive plays. This is a Lamborghini, a Maserati, a high luxury car offense. And Mario's treating it like they're in a school zone. Or Shannon Dawson, whoever you want to lay the most blame. I don't disagree with Mario's belief in building from the trenches out. That applies to the NFL. That applies to college football as well. If you can dominate the lines of scrimmage, you're inherently going to have a stronger chance to win games. The problem is Mario and Shannon Dawson do not use that to their advantage. There should be a balance with this offense where they can run tempo to start off the games, to try and get as many opportunities as possible to give Malachi Tony the ball, to give CJ Daniels when he's healthy the ball, to scheme in JoJo Trader when, he doesn't make those drops or interceptions. Elijah Lofton, get him involved in the tight end game. And that will eventually wear down the defense that you're facing. So Mark Fletcher, Brown, Jordan can go run all over the place. And you can instill the offense that you prefer to run in the second half, preferably the fourth quarter, to grind out the clock after you've already built an up strong enough lead. But they don't do that. They don't execute with the offense that they have now. There's a common complaint with the Hurricane fan base of Dawson consistently running into the A gap with his running backs. Just diving, HB dive, HB dive, HB dive. No bouncing to the outside, no counter runs. The dominant form of running the ball is just running it from shotgun up the middle. You have an incredibly talented offensive line. You have maulers, monsters on them. You got to find ways to execute properly. Because now there's enough film on this team and defenses have clearly made an adjustment and this offensive staff has not. There's a reason why Mario keeps losing in the month of November. It's not for lack of talent. And this has always been the knock on Mario, that he's a conservative coach, that he makes the wrong decisions in game and it ends up costing the team. Last year, they were forced to run an up-tempo spread offense because of how bad their defense was. And again, you had a number one overall pick in Cam Ward. Carson Beck clearly isn't that. Carson Beck can be a solid quarterback. I mean, the interceptions against SMU weren't entirely on him. The one he threw to JoJo Trader, he heard footsteps and bobbled the ball and it was up in the air. And he didn't want to get hit hard. That's the way it looked like on film. And the secondary plucks the ball out of the air. The one in overtime, I mean, again, you don't have to put it entirely on one person or the other, but Malachi Tony clearly, instead of cutting in, ran up, and Beck was expecting him to cut in. And the SMU player was able to jump the route and get the interception in overtime. Carson Beck has been put in bad positions lately. And unfortunately, he hasn't been able to step up. This season was clearly championship expectations. And then as the season started developing, you got the big win against Notre Dame. You got the big win against South Florida. You got the win against Florida. And you got the win against Florida State. That was still ranked at that time. You were the Sunshine State champs again. And this team almost plays as if that's it, as if there weren't any bigger goals. And besides what we've just discussed about the offense, The most glaring issue with this team is discipline. I mean, we can go on a game by game basis, but the SMU game, talking about what flipped the game, 12 penalties for 96 yards. You can't have that. The Louisville game, 9 for 67. I mean, even in the game against Florida State, again, you gave up the 19 points in the fourth quarter. You had 13 penalties for 114 yards. More than a football field of penalties. It eventually catches up to you. Again, the Florida game, you absolutely dominated them. 141 yards allowed by this defense. You had more rushing yards than they had total offense. You still had more penalties. You had 6 for 30. It's a little better, but again, when the other team is completely incompetent, when they're 0 of 13 on third downs, when they're averaging 2.7 yards per pass and 2.8 yards per rush, it's easy to be disciplined there. Notre Dame game, they had more penalty and penalty yards. It's going to catch up throughout the whole season. We've been talking about it. isn't being judged against ACC opponents. is being judged against the Ohio States, the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Oregons, at this point, the Indianas. You're judged against the top tier teams because that is where you expect to be this season. You had a veteran-laden offensive line, veteran-laden defensive line. You brought in key pieces like Xavier Lucas in the transfer portal to shore up the defense. You changed the defensive coordinator. Your major worry this season was the receiving core. Malachi Toney has been a godsend to this team, and you're still finding ways to come up short. And we'll talk about where their rankings are at in the College Football Playoff Committee later on. But you got another month to impress. You got 2 more home games. You got Syracuse and NC State. And you finish off the season at Virginia Tech and at Pitt. And Pitt is a completely different team with this true freshman quarterback. Will that be enough to get you into the playoffs after these 2 eggs that you've laid in the last 3 weeks? We'll see. Because again, those Notre Dame wins, along with Florida and Florida State, and the South Florida one, are looking farther and farther in your rearview mirror to this committee. Now, I do want to dive in to this notion of Mario Cristobal in the future at Miami. I think fans here in South Florida are not realistic of their place in college football currently. This is a great team in the 80s. Great team during multiple periods in the 90s and early 2000s. But ever since they moved into the ACC, this has not been the same institution. You've made it to 1 ACC championship game. You've never won the ACC. You haven't had that many double-digit win seasons either. Mario had a lot to do when he came here. He has raised the floor of this program significantly as to where you can be disappointed in a 10-win season. There's a process to this. Again, the main concern is, and I understand it, the main concern is, can Mario evolve as a head coach? Because going into next season, you will need to find another quarterback. Because as great as your recruiting classes have been, and they've been great, especially by ACC standards, you have not been able to get that homegrown kid at QB. And if that's the case, you will need to find a dual threat QB, or at the very least, a QB that's athletic enough that he isn't a statue in the backfield. You need to have that threat from the QB, which significantly opens up an offense, especially on the college football level. But make no mistake about it, Mario is not going anywhere. He's had a 10-year contract. He's got about $60-something million left on that deal if he were to be bought out. There's a lot of money riding on Cristobal in more ways than that contract. What a lot of people fail to realize is how much that Columbus crew that backed the hiring of their Columbus boy It's a high school in South Florida, by the way. The Columbus Crew backed the hiring of Mario Cristobal, who also went to Columbus. Jorge Mas, owner of Inter Miami, and many other wealthy individuals from that school want to see succeed, and they want to see a fellow Columbus graduate at the helm doing it. Again, the landscape of college football has changed, even though these two were back-to-back coaches. But the level of investment from the program, from Manny Diaz to Mario Cristobal, is night and day. This program really started trying to become a serious football program again when they hired Mark Richt. They were trying to win with pennies on the dollar. And now, and especially with the advent of NIL, rev share, all that new investments into college football athletics in general, having Mario at the helm who can still recruit at an elite level in high school and also be able to supplement the team with solid transfer acquisitions, in theory, makes this a high floor team. This isn't Ohio State or Georgia or Alabama. There's generations who don't know what the U is all about compared to what the older millennials and people older than that have seen. They don't know that. They can see the documentaries, the U and the U Part 2. They can see the YouTube footage. It's not going to be in high definition, that's for sure. That's some old tape you're looking at. That's the reality of where Miami stands. Now, I've been on record saying this before, and I'll say it again. College football is better when certain blue bloods are back in the national conversation. is one of the top tier programs when I'm talking about that. When the U is back, college football is better. When Michigan's good, college football's better. It's just one of those things that you can see, like, when Georgia's good, college football's better. When Tennessee, when Florida State, when Florida's good, when all three of those Florida schools are humming, college football is better. The Hurricanes aren't exactly there yet. And for the older generation, they still think it's the college football of yesteryear, where you can just build the team up, and by year 3, you need to be winning. That unfortunately doesn't happen today in the transfer portal era, in the NIL era. And that could be an indictment of football in general. But expectations have to be recalibrated. And you have to ask this question and think of a logical answer. Who would be better than Mario Cristobal at the University of Miami? And I said a logical answer, because you're not going to go out there and get Kirby Smart or Dan Lanning or even someone like Lane Kiffin to come to Miami. And even if you were to get Lane Kiffin to come to Miami, let's play this hypothetical out. Is he a better recruiter than Mario? Mario lives and breathes recruiting. He understands how vital and important it is, and he holds his coaches to that standard as well. Lane is a good to great coach on game day. But again, even at Ole Miss, he does have his hiccups where he loses to teams that he shouldn't, like Kentucky last year. They're having a good year this year, but again, look at their schedule. That's why I say think logically. If you want to promote someone from within and say, okay, give Jason Taylor the job. Let's be realistic, folks. What experiences does Jason Taylor have? Can he build out a coaching staff? Will he be significantly better on game day? Will he be just as good of a recruiter as Mario? It is more likely that Mario Cristobal can make adjustments to his coaching style than it is for you to find a better fit at the University of Miami. And again, this isn't me absolving Mario of his flaws. But again, reality has to set in for this fan base. If they win out, it's another 10-win season. Or they can go 9-3, make a bowl game, and then have another 10-win season. Building blocks for the future. And that's not something you want to hear when you came into the season with championship expectations. Now, it's time to see how this team responds. That's a Mark Marvell type of quote. Maybe this team will actually respond instead, like what the Seminoles do. But in all seriousness, how does this team play for the last 4 games of the season when the likelihood of you reaching the college football playoffs is slim? What are you playing for at this point? Therefore, how do you react? And that's going to be another measurement of Mario Cristobal this year. And we'll touch base on that when the season ends. That's it for today's episode, folks. You know the drill. You can find us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, turn those notifications on. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe there. Rate us 5 stars. Turn the notifications on there. And you can find us on Spotify as well. Coming up, we'll probably be doing the same thing about FSU. We still have to dive into the LSU coaching search and the reactions to the first college football playoff rankings of 2025. Again, however you may be listening, thanks for listening. Thanks for stopping by. And we'll catch you next time here on 305 Insights. Have a good one, folks.